Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. There is simply not a program hotter in the country than Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. And look, I said it earlier this week. We've seen a lot of good runs from Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs on the recruiting trail over the last couple of years. I don't know if we've seen a run like we've seen over the last couple of days. And Dill, this might be the biggest get that they've had over the last couple of days. Four-star defensive lineman James Johnson committing to Georgia. There's really two reasons. Look, we're going to get into the player. A player that we are both very big fans of. Number one, another impressive recruiting battle where you go head-to-head with two of the in-state schools in Florida and Miami, both of which were pushing very hard for James Johnson. Dill, you also go head-to-head against Texas. And look, if I'm a Georgia fan, I am paying attention to the Georgia-Texas recruiting battles because you look at, hey, who are you going to have to beat every single year to go win an SEC championship? Not only an SEC championship, go win a national championship. You're going to have to play Coach Sark in Texas. And so winning these recruiting battles like James Johnson, like Chase Calicut yesterday afternoon, it's massive. Anytime you get a win over Texas. Dill, secondly, these body types, just not prevalent in 2026. It is really hard to get your hands on kids that look like James Johnson. Last year in the 2025 cycle, just in state, like Elijah Griffin, Justice Terry, Kevin Wynn, these kind of bodies in 2026 nationally are really hard to get. George getting it done for James Johnson is one of those you felt like this is going to, I think for lack of better terms, like the programs that can land these kind of guys because there are so few of them, that puts you in the driver's seat in terms of line of scrimmage play over the next couple of years. That's what I like about this get. And we've gone 2 minutes. We haven't even talked about James Johnson. Fired up to get into him. Before we do it, as always, to the Georgia fans, appreciate you guys. And a lot of Georgia fans been riding with the boys the last couple of days as we break down these commitments. Been a blast for us. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And thus, it's kind of crazy to say because of the amount of commitments Georgia has just landed. Georgia still ain't done on the recruiting trail. We'll talk about some other names to monitor. Dill, James Johnson, what's he bringing to Athens?
I mean, he has the athleticism you need from at least a couple of your defensive linemen each year. And I feel like we've been talking about this, like who's going to be that guy, that Jalen Carter, that real disruptor for Georgia this year. I think a lot of people think it's going to be Christian Miller. Yes. Over the next couple of years, I think you look at what James Johnson can do, maybe compared to some of the guys not named Elijah Griffin from last year's class, who, again, can maybe play more of the Warren Brinson, the Nazir Stackhouse kind of role, which is an important role. I'm not trying to minimize that. But you need a couple guys who can get in the backfield and be very disruptive, and that feels like what James Johnson is.
And here's what I'll say, Dylan, what I appreciate the most out of James Johnson, and I'm sure what Kirby Smart appreciated the most, is I think he can do it both. Like, at 6'2.5", 290, this dude can be a fire hydrant when you want him to be a fire hydrant. You say, hey, go play with some low pads and go eat up a double team. He's capable of doing that. But when you say, hey, we're going to put you at that 3 tech and we're going to let you pin your ears back and get after the passer, James Johnson can give you legitimate pass rush juice as well. You mentioned athleticism, and I think that's very fair to say. I'm a reference horsepower. Because he's a little bit shorter, his ability to just kind of like get under opposing offensive linemen and just move people around. This kid's a force. He plays with low pads. He's a really strong kid. He's really explosive out of his stance. I love the defensive lineman that can give me a both. And it's hard to find those guys. As much as I love Nazir Stackhouse and the role that he played for Georgia, you kind of knew that he wasn't going to be a massive difference maker rushing the passer. When you get guys like James Johnson, who I think can give you that Nazir Stackhouse, hey, I'm going to eat up some double teams and be tough, but I can also be a guy like Christian Miller and go get after the passer. Really valuable.
And there's not really that other guy on the board right now for Georgia. Like you look at kind of the guys they're pursuing, like this was kind of the one. And this is like the type of win when maybe, again, you said it, like this isn't a loaded defensive tackle class like probably there was last year. I mean, you got to hit on a couple of them. And James Johnson felt like the guy Georgia kind of decided on. And again, that wasn't going to be an easy battle, even if it was Georgia's priority, because it's Miami's priority, it's Florida's priority,
And Texas is probably like this kid was a priority from almost every program across the country because there ain't a lot of guys that play and look like James Johnson in this class. Dill, the only, and I mean, it's like a con. It just needs some more technical refinement. Like, I feel like he just relies on being just an overwhelmingly powerful and athletic and explosive individual. There's not a ton of hand usage. If he can develop that over the next couple of years, of which I have zero reason to believe that Georgia will not develop that, I think he's going to be a really good football player. Dill, look at this class here. All right, so with this commitment, Georgia passes Notre Dame for the number 2 spot in the country. All of these names, and we got to highlight James Johnson in red now that he's committed. All of the names that are not highlighted, you feel really good about. Let's start PJ Dean. I mean, PJ Dean is a guy committing June 30th. This is coming down to Georgia, South Carolina. A little bit of a different flavor. A guy that legitimately can play the 3-tech, but if you look at his body, hey, he might be able to hang out on the edge. Really strong kid for not being the biggest individual this early on in his high school career. The way I look at it, with James Johnson locked in, Carter Lucky and Seven Cloud coming from JUCO, if you can go just one of two in terms of PJ Dean and Valden Stone in a very difficult class in terms of interior defensive linemen, that would be a phenomenal haul for Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs.
And again, given what they kind of brought in last year, I don't think you're like panicking if you don't necessarily bring in another defensive tackle. Like James Johnson was the big one, because without him, you don't have that guy who can maybe feel like is the centerpiece of this class. Like Carter Lucky might be an interesting player for sure, but you don't feel like he projects to be a really dominant player in the SEC. Seven Cloud's certainly an interesting one. I'm not even 100% sure how to project him out. But James Johnson was the guy who was going to be the centerpiece for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, and here's the crazy part now is like, okay, you're sitting here number 2 class in the country, and it's all right, Derek Cooper. Like, that's neck and neck between Miami and Georgia. And I heard that Texas might be sniffing around there too, so that might be another like Georgia Texas one to battle. Caden Prothro, Georgia Texas battle coming down the stretch, but it's hard for me to see, especially losing Mark Bowman. It's hard for me to see Georgia letting that kid out of state. Same thing with Tyler Atkinson. You know, it's like some of the biggest names on the board for Georgia. You're sitting with the number 2 class in the country, and some of the biggest names are not committed to Georgia, and you feel like they're going to be landing a few of these guys over the next couple of weeks. We'll see how it plays out. I feel like you're right. This is a really big win for Georgia because you needed a body type like James Johnson. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. We will continue to break down the commitments as they come in. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.